to be back here again talking about, I gotta nerd out about voting. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Before we dive right in, I'm just gonna introduce our panelists. James, you've been introduced before. Erika, next to James, we have Erika Swilley, the Executive Director of the Foundation of the National Basketball Players Association. And she brings a wealth of experience from her philanthropic endeavors with organizations like the Detroit Pistons, Golden State Warriors, Chicago Sky, and Sky Cares Foundation, and Detroit Shock. Welcome, Erika. Kyle Lierman, a friend of mine, is the CEO of Civic Nation, a nonprofit ecosystem for organizing and education initiatives, including the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, Change Collective, It's On Us, When We All Vote, and We the Action. And last but certainly not least, we have Anil Nathan, who is a member of the board of We the Veterans Society for American Democracy and is the co-chairman of the board as well. He is a first-generation American and second-generation Air Force veteran following his father, who was drafted during the Vietnam War after immigrating from India. So welcome. Give it up for our panelists. Okay, so we like a little audience engagement if you've been to these give and goes. 2025 is an off-cycle election year. I like to say that they are the most important. It's an odd number year where there is neither a presidential election or a midterm election. Nonetheless, there are over 100,000 elections taking place this year. I'm a Virginia girl. I live in Virginia. There's a big governor's race there. I'm excited to go vote early. That means, though, that there are more seats on the ballot this year than there were in 2024, which is so interesting because there's always this emphasis on presidential elections and then everyone's quiet in the off year. So let's see what you all know. What percentage of eligible American voters vote in local off-year elections? And you can scan the QR code and take a guess. 5%, 45%, 70%, 20%, or 55%. I'll give folks a minute or so. What is the right answer?
Well, thank you. And it's great to be with you all. I should just start with, we so appreciate our partnership with the NBA and the coalition, the NBPA at Civic Nation. When we all vote, you guys are just remarkable partners at the league level, the union level, and then teams across the country are just remarkable partners of ours. So we're grateful. You guys are right. 20%. So in local elections, on average, about 20% of people turn out. I will say, sadly, in Board of Elections, which I was telling folks earlier, I have 3 daughters, so I'm very invested in my local public school district right now. It's even lower, about 5 to 10% in school board races. So we see 20% for local elections across the board, but at those school board races, it's even lower. So it's just why it's so important for leaders like you all to be getting involved in spreading the word and making sure folks are educated about the top of the ticket and all the way up and down.
Can you expand on that, on like what are some of the key local elections? I mean, you mentioned the school board, and I think of every now and then, every few years or so, we'll hear about some school board election, and then it will literally have a significant influence beyond like that local jurisdiction. So would love for you to talk a bit about some of the key races or key elections taking place, as well as how the outcome has a significant impact on our daily lives more than people understand.
Of course. Well, first off, we're in New York. Hopefully folks know there's a big mayoral race here, as well as comptroller and a number of other races here in the city. And in New Jersey, we have statewide elections. So you have the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race, the state legislature in New Jersey, and Alencia mentioned, of course, the great state of Virginia.
The Commonwealth.
I'm a Marylander. So. But huge governor's race, attorney general, lieutenant governor. And actually a few years ago in Virginia, a race was tied. A state legislative race was tied. And that race determined which party controlled the entire, I believe, House of Representatives in Virginia. So if you ever needed a jolt on why voting matters, literally there was a tie in a Virginia state legislative race. So we have those sort of big national ones. We also have a ton of mayor's races. So you have mayor's races in Detroit, in Charlotte, in New Orleans, in Pennsylvania, in the city of Philadelphia, we have the controller. There's also a big Supreme Court race in the state of Pennsylvania right now. So we have tons of elections happening all across the country. It's actually amazing to see the coalition's priorities up on the screen here earlier, because those issues are often more affected by state and local races than they are by federal government. So if you care about criminal justice reform, if you care about policing reform, if you care about voting rights, those are issues that are decided at the state and local level for the most part. One thing just to mention too is that there are enormous ballot measures up this year in the state of California and in the state of Texas. We have huge consequential ballot measures that are on the ballot. It seems crazy, but if you're not involved, other people are making those decisions for you.
Erika and James, I want to ask you all why it has become such a critical issue for the NBA and the Players Association through your campaigns like Get in the Game, Vote, and you all seeing the importance of the space that you occupy being such a critical messenger and organizer for folks who participate.
No, you go ahead. Please.
With your wonderful vote pin.
Thank you. No, this is definitely an issue that at the Players Association is very important to us. And we know that our players have a very unique platform to spread the word and to get others kind of galvanized and out there voting. It's also important to keep in mind that our players are very young. So just thinking about our rookie class, majority of them, this will be maybe their first election voting. Majority of our players are in that 23, 24 spot, so haven't even voted in a presidential election. So for us, if we're going to use them as, spokes people, we also want them to be educated, and we also want them to be registered to vote. So for us at the union, we are making sure that all of our players are registered, and we're making sure they're getting out there and voting as well. It's a little bit difficult. They have, during most elections in November, they're in season. And so trying to navigate that space in terms of mail-in ballots or absentee ballots. And so we really try to do our best to get in front of that, to make sure that we know where players are going to be, what elections are taking place, so that we can, partner with wonderful organizations like When We All Vote, get the information that we know that they need, educate them, make sure that they're registered, and then make sure that they have a plan to vote before we then put them out there in a PSA or in social media, asking others to do the same.
Well, I think the history of the coalition really starts with voting rights. At the end of the day, when players and team governors and coaches came together in 2020 to create the coalition and say that as a collective, there's more that we could do across the NBA community to push into social justice and to stand for policy, voting is first and foremost among those things, because voting is the first right of democracy. Right? Without the right to vote, without the right to cast the ballot, without the ability to do it freely and fairly, without making your voice heard, then very little else can happen on any issue, no matter what it is that you care about.
So Anil, I want to turn to you and talk about the organization's focus on voter registration as well as election volunteerism. And why was it so important for We the Veterans to create Vet the Vote, an initiative laser focused on veterans and military families?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it ties to a lot of the themes of what everybody has mentioned before. So Vet the Vote is a national campaign that we started in 2022 and carry through to elections moving forward, that is focused on recruiting veterans and military family members to serve as poll workers in our elections. And it's one of those underappreciated parts of our democratic process that elections don't just happen magically, right? There's no infrastructure that exists without volunteers and without patriotic citizens from every community across this country who devote some or part of their days or weeks to actually make them run. It's something that we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years. There's been a steady decrease in the typical cohort of people who have volunteered to run elections previously, and it's become an increasing need to fill. And so with Vet the Vote, we essentially identified the need, number one, and our very simple kind of answer was, well, there's 17 million veterans and millions more military family members across this country, all of whom have served in one way, shape, or form in a prior life. who better to step up to fill this role than that group? But I think the other part of it that's really important to highlight is we have all seen and felt this kind of decrease in overall confidence or questions that are being asked about how elections are run and, are they truly free and fair? And for us, the downstream impact of having this community of veterans and military family members who are diverse, who represent every single state in this country, who represent every socioeconomic class, who represent every side of the political spectrum, and have this station of respect, regardless of whether you sit on the left, you sit on the right, or you sit on the north, whatever it is, right? People, generally speaking, have a high level of trust in veterans and military family members. And so if we can get veterans and military family members to serve in election roles more broadly, that downstream inspires confidence in every American.
Kyle, I want to ask you, how do people in the country currently kind of feel about voting and democracy broadly?
Yeah, well, sadly, I say that Netflix and chill won the 2024 election. More folks actually sat out in 2024 than voted. Than voted for either candidate. So 90 million Americans sat out the last election, which is just, I think, a sad state for our country when more people aren't showing up. And when it comes to young people, only 47% of young people voted. And I've been describing this to folks as we're sort of going through this cycle of civic unraveling in our country right now, where I'm not really sure which part started first, but democracy hasn't been delivering for people or showing up for people, so people stop showing up for democracy. And we've got to break that cycle. And the best way to break that cycle is to create a surge where more people show up to vote and demand that their voices are heard.
What messages are then motivating the people that you all are trying to talk to get out and vote, to change that number from 20% to at least let's get to 25% this year, right? So we can keep building on that.
Well, I'll just jump in quickly and say, one of the things I love about being a nonpartisan organization is that we're not telling people what to vote for or who to vote for. We're saying we are here to encourage you to use your own power, to use your own voice. You decide what you care about and educate people on the different sets of issues that could be on the ballot. So whether that's education, healthcare, the environment, criminal justice, policing, all of those issues are on the ballot in every election, and help folks understand how the issues that they care about are connected to their vote, and how that is true not just in the presidential election, but in state and local elections as well.
Anyone else got some messaging that really resonates with folks?
I would definitely say we are not the experts in this space, and so we have to align and partner with the folks that are, again, to help us spread the word. I mean, I would say that our Get in the Game vote has been, widespread and something that seems to resonate. For some reason, when our athletes speak, people tend to listen. Like I said, making sure that they have a voice and they understand the importance seems to resonate, especially with young folks. I know when I was at the Pistons, we would actually show the players going out, to vote. We brought the Secretary of State in to speak with our players and kind of to get them to understand the importance. And, when you have them filling out their voter registration, somehow that seems to resonate with folks.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. Just one thing, because I know we have a lot of folks here who have enormous superpowers with your teams and with the league. And I've been doing this work for a long time. And so I will admit that it took a while to learn this. I think it's much more powerful. So when I first started doing this work, I was like, oh, we need to build voting events. We need to build events that are focused just around voting and educate people just on that. It's actually so much more powerful to weave the voting conversation into the work that you're already doing, into the events and the games and the social media that you're already driving, rather than standing up fully separate things. Because if you weave it in, then you'll catch people who don't want to just show up for a conversation about voting. And so that's the one thing I'd encourage you in, working with partners like We the Veterans and When We All Vote, help us work with you to weave the conversation about voting and the issues and the people on the ballot with the work that you're already doing, because that's where you catch people who, a lot of people are tuning out right now. The state of the world is rough, and I think a lot of people are clicking. Frankly, they're turning off the news and probably turning on the NBA. And So the question is, how can we reach those people who are trying to, who have stepped out a little bit, but just do it in sort of a gentle, educational way and weave it into the conversation that they're already having.
I want to pivot a little bit to voting laws. 2025 was the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, 1965, a landmark piece of legislation at the federal level prohibiting racial discrimination. James, I would love for you to talk a little bit about why this legislation was so critical, as well as how it's evolved over time. I mean, I'm thinking about 2013 Supreme Court decision that gutted some key provisions of it, and why there's this constant effort in Congress by some to reestablish some of the guardrails around the Rights Act.
Yeah, the VRA of 1965, a landmark piece of legislation that most people have heard of. I think the easiest way to encapsulate its impact is that was the legal bulwark against racial discrimination in voting, something that we had seen in this country for decades. And to see that sea change from 64 to 65, remember there was a Civil Rights Act of 1964 before that, the year before, but voting was so important to the fabric of this nation, and the right to protect that right was so important that the Congress was able to enact and implement a law in 1965 protecting against voting rights discrimination, making sure that everybody, no matter your color, creed, station, gender, you had access to the ballot. And in Shelby County v. Holder in 2013, the Supreme Court set a precedent saying that key provisions of the Voting Rights Act no longer apply. And essentially, that shifted the landscape and oversight mechanisms that protect voters. Our hope is that everybody across the NBA community, but especially the folks who are tuning into our game, the fans who care, that they understand and know in their market, in their locality, what's on the ballot, who's on the ballot, how they get access, and they're able to do so.
Anil, I actually want to come to you because James started talking about some of these laws, and I know we started talking about the VRA, that's a federal piece of legislation, but the states hold a lot of power as well when it comes to mail-in ballots, when it comes to early voting, same-day registration, all of these things. So we'd love for you to talk about some of this, particularly like mail-in voting, which a lot of military service members and their families use, and actually a lot of Americans use, and why it's so important in the work that you all are doing in that space.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to say, though, the concept of long lines at polling stations, one of the best ways to prevent longer lines at polling stations is to have more poll workers.
Right. That's right. Always on message.
Just an extra plug there. Yeah. But yeah, mail-in voting, I think a lot of people don't know because it feels like it's this relatively recent phenomenon and recent mechanism for expressing your taking advantage of your right to vote. It actually has history dating back to the Civil War. And so that was the means by which Union soldiers were able to vote in elections when they were deployed or, kind of on the battlefield. And it has been, over its history for a lot of military and military family members, the means that they have to express their right to vote. And it's kind of one of those things where it's crazy to imagine a world in which the people who are wearing a uniform, putting themselves in harm's way to protect our freedoms and protect our right to vote would have less ability to actually vote themselves, right? I mean, it's kind of one of those cognitive dissonance things, but yeah, mail-in voting, I mean, it's in 2024, it was 29% of voters, use mail-in balloting. It's been something that's increased since 2020 in particular, as we all remember. COVID kind of was this massive accelerator of creating opportunities to vote that didn't require you to be in person. But it's a very, very effective means of letting everybody have their right to vote. If you are not able to be in person on election day or, for whatever reason, you want to take advantage of it, makes it easier for you to express your vote, then that it's an effective channel to do that. And, obviously there's a lot of questions that get raised about, well, if you're mailing in your ballot, how secure is that? Every study that has been done over the past decade about mail-in voting has shown that there are maybe some irregularities that actually lead to more ballots being discounted because of signatures mismatching and things like that. But in terms of actual fraud, it's incredibly minuscule, just like exists for any voting across this country. And if you think about hundreds of millions of people voting, inevitably there are going to be some small, but nothing to actually shift an election. And if to, kind of James' point around, if we're trying to make it accessible, if we're trying to allow everybody to express their right to vote, then we need to create the channels that allow them to do that. And for the veteran and military family community, that is one of the primary means.
Just a quick follow-up. Does it favor one political party or the other?
No, it doesn't on a national level, and obviously everything varies state to state, but there's no kind of, there's, Democrats or Republicans have a greater advantage when it comes to mail-in voting. I mean, if everybody has access to the same mechanisms, then it's the parties who mobilize their voters to take advantage of them that are going to get the most votes, right? And so there's no data to suggest that there's any advantage to one party or another.
So I want to talk about voter ID and same-day registration laws. Kyle, I'll ask you, what do these laws seek to do, and who's impacted by them? And where are we seeing some states and localities implementing those? And while Kyle is answering, audience, get ready for another audience question.
Well, James talked about the VRA, and with the rollback of a lot of the protections that were in the VRA, more and more power has been given to the states to determine, how and when folks can vote, and sort of the barriers or the open doors that are put in front of them. And, frankly, voter ID is a modern day poll tax. And I don't know of a state where you don't have to pay to get your ID. And if you are required to have an ID in order to vote, that means you have to pay to get your ID to be able to vote. There's also dozens of states have been pushing voter ID, and I know the Social Justice Coalition and others have been doing what we can, and we have to push back against that and educate folks. And then places that it does exist, helping them work through the process to get an ID, because we have to sort of fight against these barriers, but then deal with them as a reality when they do exist. There's also just this one example that I learned has stood up to me. In the state of Georgia, if you are at a public college, you can vote with your student ID. If you're at a private college, Spelman, Morehouse, Clark Atlanta, can't use your student ID to vote. So the barriers that are being put up in front of people are real. And it's incumbent upon all of those of us in this room and speaking up here to do everything we can to help make the process as easy for folks as possible. So that was voter ID. What was your second?
Same day.
Oh, same day. So same day registration is I was talking about barriers and open doors. We want to strike down barriers when we want to create more open doors. Same day voter registration, it's just a way to make it easier for folks. That they can register and vote on the same day or at early voting locations. We've seen a lot of progress in states across the country on this. So we want to work, against modern day poll taxes, against barriers. We want to do more to push for things like same day registration, automatic voter registration. In Pennsylvania, they passed automatic voter registration. By the way, you mentioned, vote by mail doesn't benefit any one party or another. Automatic voter registration doesn't benefit one party or another. These are not partisan issues. It's just about, do you believe in creating more access to the ballot or less?
Well, and you meant there was a reaction when you listed out the schools in Georgia, right? And I think we all understood what was happening there, because a lot of private universities are HBCUs,
Exactly.
which are overwhelmingly attended by Black students, right? And so again, we go back to what you were talking about with the Voting Rights Act, and we have to reduce these barriers in voting and the discrimination that has been in voting historically. So the audience question I have is, how many states have laws, and this is actually going to bring together a lot of the work that the coalition is doing. How many states have laws that prevent people with criminal convictions from voting? I'd love for you to talk about voting rights restoration, why it's incredibly important, and how some of the NBA players have been involved in these issues, particularly Karl Anthony Towns' work in Minnesota. What's the answer?
The answer is 48,
Oh.
which is deeply distressing. This is where so many of the issues that we work on in the coalition collide. There's no one silo for criminal justice or voting or community safety or policing reform. At the end of the day, and I think everybody who's a practitioner in this space understands how we focus on one thing and connects to three others. And that is especially true when it comes to the criminal justice system and its impacts and effects. And one of the most important things to know is that folks who've had a criminal conviction, who have served time, especially for a felony, almost every single state, 48, has some kind of barrier or limitation on the ability to vote. The question is, once somebody has served their sentence, what is our obligation and ability to bring them back into the community? Because the vast, vast, vast majority of people who serve time in jail or prison are coming home. There are brothers, sisters, friends, daughters, neighbors. 1 in 3 people in this country has a criminal record. That means the vast majority of people that we know are connected to somebody or is somebody who has a criminal record. So when we have literally thousands of people coming out of jail and prison each year, but unable to vote, they're not full participants in our democracy. And in Minnesota, that was true until 2 years ago, when Restore the Vote legislation, this was a coalition of the Minnesota Restore the Vote Coalition and a host of other partners in the state, were pushing really hard to change the law. They did it. And I'm proud to say that Carl Anthony Towns, who is a member of our board, while he was with the Timberwolves, played an instrumental role in supporting that bill as it was in progress and lending his very large, very powerful platform to that campaign effort. And ultimately, that bill was signed into law, passed through the legislature, and signed into law by Governor Tim Walz, and restored for 55,000 Minnesotans their right to vote.
I want to talk about early voting, and which is available in 46 states plus the District of Columbia. Erika, you did some work with the Detroit Pistons. Pistons land, what up, though? I hope none of my friends from Detroit heard me say that, because they always come for me. But can you talk about this and why this was such an important partnership between the team and community to encourage early voting?
Yeah, no, when I was at the Pistons, and still the Pistons are doing a ton around voting, hosting different events. We put a ballot box in front of our practice facility to encourage early voting, but really galvanizing the community, and to everyone's point, the power of sport and the voice that we have. We knew it was unique. And so to be able to get thousands of people out there for a concert and a good time, and then to weave in the message of voting was pretty cool to see. And that was just one of the many events that we were able to put on and create. And then we also turned our practice facility into a receiving board, which is still happening. And the Pistons employees, we all were volunteers, and we went through trainings and learned how to become a receiving board. And yes, we have about 8 precincts that reported into our facility, and just to see the power of community come together was really, really transformational, I would say. We saw numbers go up too around the initiatives and efforts that we did in the voting space. Also, we tied voting initiatives to preseason games. So when folks would come to preseason games, we would have fun activities, outside of the game, really encouraging them to register and vote early.
Well, thank you to our panelists. And we would love for you all to let us know how you would like to be involved. But there are other ways that you can be involved, particularly for you all here at the NBA, as well as the teams that are watching. You can email the coalition at coalition@nba.com. And for everyone, you can follow the coalition at NBA Coalition on Instagram and X for more information like this, as well as both of these amazing organizations who do this work, especially on these off-year elections that, again, I say are the most important every single day. So thank you all. Thank you for having me, but thank you for being so committed to this work and trying to make voting not just easy and accessible, but fun.